Welcome, welcome, welcome to our Tuesday night. It's so much more masterclass. So today is, we are on the third pillar of our mind body wellness series, right? And so we're talking all about mastering mind body wellness and exactly what does that look like? What are the steps that we need to take? How is it all connected? You know, if I'm showing XYZ symptoms over here, what does that mean? You know, like, could it be, what exactly, right? And so this is pillar number 3. And we're talking all about digestion, right? And so if you cannot digest food, you cannot deliver energy to your body, regardless of how healthy you eat, right? So let's talk about digestion, because in pillar 1 of our roadmap, we talk about balancing cellular fuel delivery. And then in pillar 2, we're talking about lifting metabolic and immune function. Now, here's the cool thing about digestion. Digestion is like the bridge between pillar 1 and pillar 2, right? So digestion is how we deliver all of that energy and all of that fuel when we're doing our blood sugar and our oxygen and everything, where a lot of it is still digestion, right? And also it bridges over into metabolic and immune function. And we're going to go over how that kind of starts today. And just so y'all know, this is going to be a 2-parter. So today we're going to start talking about digestion. And then next week, we're going to go in a little bit deeper and go into leaky gut and exactly what happens when we get like an immune disruption in our digestive system. So what is digestion, right? So digestion is really defined as the act or process of converting food into chemical substances that can be absorbed into the blood and utilized by the body tissue, right? So it's important to understand that it's the process of converting food into nutrients so that it can be absorbed, right? And now digestion is accomplished by literally physically breaking down and churning and diluting and dissolving substances, right? And then after, you've chewed it up and you get it in your stomach and it's broken down and dissolves it, it's actually split. Like you intake the food, right? And then it splits it chemically into similar compounds, right? So it gets smaller and smaller and smaller. So carbohydrates, for example, are broken down into, we call them polysaccharides, but we'll just call them complex sugars. And then they're broken down again into monosaccharides or simple sugars, right? And then proteins are broken down into amino acids, and fats are absorbed as fatty acids and glycerol and glycerin. And so now the digestive process takes place in, we call it the alimentary canal, or it's the digestive system. Now that starts at the mouth and goes all the way through to the anus. But really, the saliva glands, the liver, the gallbladder, the pancreas, right? Even though all of those things are actually technically located outside of the digestive system, right? It's outside of the actual tube that is our digestive tract. They are all accessory organs that, because their secretions provide essential enzymes and chemicals in order to make the digestive system work. So what do we do when there's a problem with digestion? Like, how do we pinpoint it, right? So here's the secret. I'm going to give it to you right now. So anytime, no matter what the problem is with digestion, you always start from north to south when you want to solve any digestive issue. Meaning that the problem up north, specifically up here, right? Up north, further up in the body, if it's not working, can lead to the problems further down in the digestive process. So you got to go solve the problems from north to south, right? So when we talk about digestion going from north to south, the most northern part the highest part of digestion starts in the brain, right? Brain functions control digestive process because the digestion, the act of digesting isn't just like hanging out in space, right? It's not just doing random stuff. It's not, just doing whatever it wants to do. It's all controlled and orchestrated by brain function, right? So with the brain, it actually starts with sight, smell, and taste. So even the thought of food actually will trigger the brain to begin digestive function, right? These sensations enter the brain and that triggers appetite. It actually triggers digestive processes. It literally triggers neurological signals to be sent down through what is called the vagus nerve. So now that we're traveling down, the vagus nerve, when stimulated by the brain, will go ahead and send the signal to your gut, right? And it goes all the way down. The vagus nerve travels all the way down. So then there's our stomach. And so by seeing food and smelling food and thinking about food, and then starting to taste food, you trigger the brain to start sending signals down to the gut to prime the digestive process. And it starts to, these signals start to cause like enzymes to be created, stomach acids are being made at this point. And so as we travel down, there are 3 phases to digestion. Number 1, the first phase is the cephalic phase, which means cephalic means in your head, right? So this includes everything happening above the neck. So as we travel south in digestion, we start with the brain and then we have chewing, right? Now, before you swallow something, you gotta chew it, right? You wanna chew it up until it's liquid. And I know that this is sometimes hard, right? Because sometimes we're really busy, we might eat too fast, or we eat in a rush, or maybe we're eating in the car while we're driving, our kids, whatever. That's actually not good for digestion, right? Those are not the things that we want to do because it doesn't set up proper digestion. You should be eating in a relaxed state and taking time to chew your food well. And the reason for that is because remember I told you it starts in the brain and then it goes to the vagus nerve. Now the vagus nerve is part of that parasympathetic nervous system. Now, if you remember, if you've been with us for a while, if you're new, then you might not remember, but if you've been with us for a while, we talk about the parasympathetic nervous system and how it controls digestion, relaxation, sexual function, right? While your sympathetic nervous system is part of that fight or flight response, right? And so when you're stressed and when your body is in fight or flight response, you're automatically diminishing parasympathetic function, which means that digestion is compromised because you have less signal from the brain to the gut, right? So we're already starting here. It's compromised if you're stressed, if you're eating in a stress state. If you're watching TV while you're eating, that's stressing your body out. I know you're probably like, oh, but I'm watching really calming things. Probably not, right? So if you're playing video games, right? Like my kids will sometimes want to like play video games while like you can't do that, right? Like your body's not going to, well, you can do that, but you're not going to digest properly if you do that, right? So we want to make sure that we are in a relaxed phase so that we can have proper signal going to the gut to get this thing started, right? So the second phase is called the gastric phase of digestion. And so this is when food actually reaches your stomach, right? And we have special cells in our stomach that produce hydrochloric acid, which is stomach acid. In addition, it also produces other things. And there are things like intrinsic factor and other types of chemicals that help us to absorb certain types of vitamins and things like that. Like specifically intrinsic factor is very necessary to help us absorb vitamin B12, right? As well as other things. But here we are, stomach acid is really important. And I will tell you, this is one of those things that's been absolutely like really attacked right, in Western medicine, because anytime you have some kind of stomach problem, or even if you have a throat problem or a sinus problem, oftentimes in Western medicine, doctors will like link this and blame it on stomach acid, right? And then they give people acid stopping medication, right? Prescriptions. Well, what happens is that when you take an acid stopping medication, it just diminishes your stomach acid production. Well, you need stomach acid production for protein absorption, for mineral absorption, and for sterilization in your gut, right? That means to kill germs. And by the way, there's lots of germs that come into our body through our mouth, right? Not just from like the toxic germs and pathogens and stuff that are in our food and in our environment, but also just like breathing the air and all kinds of things, right? So if you don't have a proper amount of stomach acid, then your protein absorption is going to be compromised, right? Your mineral absorption is going to be compromised. This includes calcium, magnesium, iron, right? And when iron absorption is compromised, what happens, right? Our blood is not as effective, right? And so remember, we're working from north to south. So first we got to make sure the brain is working and we are calm and stress-free, right? You can't eat stressed and expect to have optimal digestion. And I want you to remember this, because in a few minutes, when Greg shares about our Soul Connection product, I want you to remember that you can't eat in a stressed state, right? We have to calm the mind in order to have proper digestion. We need to break down our foods, right? In order to have proper digestion, right? And then if that's working, we're breaking down our food so we can have proper digestion and we're eating in a calm state, then we can look at some other things. Like we can start to look at, proper digestion with stomach acid, right? So the thing about the gastric phase, it actually stimulates the later phases of digestion, right? The stomach acid actually will go ahead and stimulate the pancreas to release enzymes, right? Pancreatic enzymes like your lipase, your amylase, the things that break down like carbohydrates and fats, and then the protease that break down protein. And that's going to cause malabsorption issues and maldigestion, right? If you don't break down your food, your carbohydrates, your fats, your proteins, then you have malabsorption and maldigestion. So this is where you might get gassy, you might get bloated. Sometimes people will see fat in their stool. And you might feel like your digestion just doesn't work. Like maybe you just kind of always feel kind of heavy feeling. I have a lot of people that come to me and they're like, oh, I just kind of always feel full, right? It doesn't matter how it goes, right? And so the stomach acid also stimulates the gallbladder to release bile. And without enough stomach acid, bile does not get released properly. Now, by the way, for the vagus nerve to get a signal, this whole digestive process, it has to come from the cortex itself, right? Which is the brain. So some people have brain function that's diminished, right? And so how would that happen, right? Well, if you don't have the right cellular fuel delivery, remember we've talked about this 2 weeks ago, we talked about oxygen, right? Being really important for the brain and all the rest of our cells as well. And then we talked about last week, blood sugar, glucose being the primary source of fuel for the brain. So if you don't have proper fuel to the brain is going to suffer and decrease in function, right? So the brain also needs activation. So fuel and activation is really, really, really important. So if you have less signal coming down through the vagus nerve, therefore less signal coming to the gut, less hydrochloric acid, therefore less pancreatic enzymes, and then gallbladder issues, and then eventually you're going to have motility issues like constipation or struggle to eliminate, right? This is all connected, right? And as you get into really studying digestion, it will blow you away. Like there is research that shows that when people get a concussion, they struggle to digest food properly and struggle to eliminate. Yeah, it's pretty incredible. Now, of course, ancient wisdom has kind of been telling us this for a long time, but now our modern science, they're catching up and they're proving it, right? So we love that for modern science, to prove to the rest of the world what ancient wisdom has been telling us for years. And so the third phase of digestion is your intestinal phase, right? We have the intestinal phase, which continues with absorption, right? In the small intestine, absorption depends on healthy villi, right? And so this is really important. So inside your intestinal tract, it's not just like a smooth, round tube, right? It actually looks like fingers, right? It looks like this. And they're called villi because villi is Latin for finger, right? And these villi basically increase the surface area. So what it is they look like this, but they're actually like a bunch of, like they're a layer of cells, right? That are like all folded up, right? And then there's even smaller folds on the bigger folds. We call those microvilli, right? And if you take all of your villi and you stretched them all out and you stretched out all the folds, it actually will measure greater than a football field, right? That's how much surface area you have inside of your small intestines. Now, what this does is it helps with absorption of nutrients. So I just want you to put this together for just a second. You have a surface area the size of a football field because that's how important it is for you to absorb nutrients, right? Because our body needs lots and lots and lots and lots of nutrients to make energy in every single cell, because every single process we do requires energy, and therefore we require tons and tons and tons of nutrition. Now, real quick, because this is why we've talked about over the last few weeks in our Mind, Body, Wellness series, we've talked about the balance of cellular fuel delivery. If you remember, in the very first week, we actually talked about mind, body, wellness and how it's all connected. And we talked about all these drinks, right? Because they're full of nutrition. We talked about how they're so power packed with nutrition to help us get that nutrition, right? And then we talked about balancing that cellular fuel delivery. And we talked about our soul megas, right? Which is helping not only to, power through with circulation and everything, but they also, here's a ninja secret, they also help to fuel the brain, right? And then last week we talked about our SoulFlex PI, which I like to think of as a cellular activation product. Yes, it helps with systemic inflammation, but it really, it's helping every single cell with inflammation, which is absolutely incredible, right? And so getting enough nutrients to the cells so that they can be working properly is really, really important. And that's the reason why over the course of this series, we've been kind of layering on the steps, right? So in the small intestines, just to give a quick overview, we have 3 sections, right? We have the duodenum, the jejunum, and the ileum, right? And it's going from north to south again, right? So it starts in the highest part, that's where the duodenum is. And then as we go down the small intestine, further south, the ileum is at the end, right? And so then we have a transition to the large intestine. Now the transition from the small to large intestine, there's actually a valve there, and it's called the ileocecal valve. And this valve is really super important because it controls the flow from the small intestine to the large intestine. Now, this is a one-way valve because when food, as it gets closer and closer to the large intestine, it actually becomes fecal matter, right? And once it passes through the ileocecal valve, it belongs in the large intestine where there's lots and lots of bacteria, right? Now, this is the biggest house of, you hear it as like your microbiome, right? Well, this part, this at the end of your, where your large intestine is like the biggest housing of your microbiome. So this is where food, is getting fermented with these bacteria, and it's really, breaking them down further and further. And you do not want that stuff to come back the other direction, right? Because the fecal matter coming back up into your small intestine is not a good thing, right? This is a recipe for developing what we call SIBO, or small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, right? As well as a whole host of other digestive issues. So some people, a few people do have malfunctioning ileocecal valves. And I'll tell you, it's usually caused by the vagus nerve not innervating the valve properly, meaning that it's not sending the signal to that valve properly, right? And here's the secret. It's usually either connected to brain function or stress. So again, we want to calm our nervous system and calm all the rest of our body as well, so that we can have proper digestion, not just from here, but all the way through to the end as we're passing into our large intestine. Now, there may be other reasons. There are things like toxic colon and things like that, but generally, we look at this from north to south, right? You got to make sure things are working on the top, starting with the brain, traveling down, through, chewing and everything else into the stomach. And then, so most often what we find is when we address calming of the brain and improving digestive deficiency, we eliminate nearly all digestive issues, because it's a cumulative effect. Because when we address the brain and we address the vagus nerve and helping the brain and the body to calm themselves, and then we help to break down the food for better digestion, we usually see a cascade of results from these improvements. But my point is that you've got to look at digestion from the higher phase. So if you are having cramping, lower intestinal cramping and things like that, I would encourage you to look higher up about what you can do, right? So if you're not digesting your food with enzymes, and sometimes people look at oh, well, I have lower abdominal cramping, I must need probiotics. And I'm a big supporter of probiotics, right? But if you're taking probiotics and you're not addressing the digestion and assimilation, like if you're not addressing, the enzymes and the calming, the stress and everything else, then you're not giving your probiotics the best chance at really help at being optimal, right? So you really, in some ways, you're missing the boat a little bit, right? Because you're not addressing all the parts in the right order, right? So you got to go from north to south. The probiotics go to the colon. That's in the southern part, right? So you got to start from the north. And another thing people ask me all the time is they'll say, well, my gallbladder is already removed. What do I do? Because now you don't have this organ to produce the bile and squirt it in the GI tract. Now, of course, the bile is still produced in the liver, but what's happening is you're only getting like a slow drip, right? You're not getting what you need when you need it, right? So you want to definitely address calming your digestive system if you don't have a gallbladder, right? You definitely want to take steps to help, reduce all the other things so that we can have that cascade effect if you have had your gallbladder removed. So what are some things that we can experience if we're not digesting properly, right? So if you're not getting enough nutrients through digestion, you're not going to get, we talked about, you're not going to get as much fuel, right? So your brain's going to suffer, your body's going to suffer, your emotions are going to be compromised. And I always like to give this analogy because you remember if you've ever had children, right? Or if you've been around children, like when they're really young and they're hungry, they're not in the best mood, right? So just know that when your body is not getting the proper nutrition that it needs, your emotions will suffer as well, right? And you can even be throwing temper tantrums as well as an adult, right? And so your emotions are compromised. You get brain symptoms, right? Fatigue. Fatigue is a huge one when we're not getting enough nutrients, right? You just feel tired all the time. It doesn't matter. You could sleep like 10 hours and you wake up and you're still tired, right? You could experience blood sugar problems. You might have amino acid deficiency. And this one's really, really big because amino acid deficiency, meaning that your proteins are not being broken down into amino acids properly, it starts to impact neurotransmitters, right? And for you to make serotonin, dopamine, GABA, all of these type of neurotransmitters, you need amino acids from protein, right? But if you can't break down the protein, then your brain's going to be could be suffering from these neurotransmitter issues because it doesn't have the raw ingredients to make them. So I want you to remember this point too, because in a few minutes, you might be hearing something about something that helps to break down protein. So poor digestion also affects immune function, right? Because remember, the stomach acid helps you to sterilize germs, right? Because acid kills bacteria. So if you have digestion issues, then you're more likely to get SIBO. You're also more likely to get small intestinal fungal overgrowth or candida, right? You're also more likely to have problems with parasites, even amoebas, right? Like you can have all of those, pathogens and everything else if you're not digesting properly. So I hope you're seeing how every single thing is connected. And by addressing the root cause in the particular sequence, then all of your symptoms really start to improve. But that's only if you follow, we want to follow the roadmap, right? Which is why we're doing this Mind Body Wellness series, so that we can master all of the pieces of Mind Body Wellness, right? And so I believe that when you do this, that your body is able to rebalance and reset and regenerate itself, because our bodies are super miraculous. And it only takes a little bit of study into what exactly our digestive processes do, or our brain or our heart, anything. You can just do a little bit of study and you'll realize that you're a walking miracle. Our bodies are literally miraculous. And when we start to get that regeneration and reset, you're going to get your energy back. You're going to, find your old self again, maybe find your new self, a new self that you've never even known that you had, right? You start to get back to the things that you enjoy again, right? You might even get back to the gym because now you have the energy to do so. Maybe you'll take a vacation that you've always wanted because you finally have that zeal and zest for life back again, right? Maybe you become that mom that you've always wanted to be for your kids because you have the energy to play with them, right? So it'll help you to feel more confident. All of these things. And we're only, just to remind you guys, we're only on step 3, right? We've only talked about circulation and oxygen. We've only talked about blood sugar, and now we're talking about digestion. Coming up for the rest of this, we have some incredible, as we put all the pieces together, you get the opportunity to really enliven your life. And that's really what it's all about. So we're going to stop right here. We're going to pause. And then next week, we're going to come in and we're going to talk about specifically what happens when you do get immune flare-ups because of digestive issues, right? And so we usually call these things like leaky gut and different things like that. So that's going to be part 2 of the digestive series. But for tonight, our Soul Connection segment, I have asked Greg to talk about a product that is super near and dear to my heart. It's this one right here. Some of y'all may have guessed. And I will tell you, it's near and dear to my heart for so many reasons, because it does so much, right? It helps with muscle preservation and digestion and calming stress and so many things. I'll tell you, if you're on a weight loss journey, the more you take of these, the more the waistline goes like this, right? So if you want to shrink the waistline, you might want to add some of these to your program. But it does so many things. But I'm not going to take it away, because I have, of course, the president and founder of Soul Naturals with us tonight to give us all the details, or at least, as many details as we can fit in this segment on Vertizymes, and tell us all about how it can help us to reach optimal digestive goals.
Awesome, Erica. Right. Thank you. Another stellar lesson from Erica. I'm just sitting here absorbing it, loving it, and I learned lots of good things. But I do want to just add two thoughts. I mean, Erica talked about the vagus nerve. I just wanted to say, from my experience, you don't activate the vagus nerve driving to Nevada. That's the first contribution I'm making. The second one, this is really a contribution. But you mentioned your kids, and they're hungry and they can get angry and whatever, and we can as adults. You just reminded me, in our kitchen, above the cabinets, our top cabinets don't reach the ceiling. There's a gap. So Donna has stuff up there, decorations. decor. I'm sure they're not called decorations, but I'm a guy. That's what I said. She has this little sign up there that says, "I'm sorry about what I said when I was hungry." You made me think of that sign because it's so true. And it's true. I was about 20 years at another company before we founded Solle. And people used to tease me around lunchtime. If it went beyond noon to like 12:31, I just had this metabolism demeanor that, yeah, blood sugar would drop. And I don't think I was angry, but I would just like energy, you know? So anyway, so true. And so many lessons. And I wish, you know, I was listening like every week. I'm just amazed at how clearly you teach things, Erica. But I was thinking, you know, the people that I know that have this information that you taught tonight, you know, they maybe they have, you know, a pretty big portion, maybe not every little thing, but that really understand the concepts that you talked about. I don't know a single one of them that does not take enzymes on a daily basis, a single one of them, because it's not just like, oh, you take them at a certain age because we don't produce enough. It's all about the understanding where food is today and understanding what more these enzymes do besides, you know, the breaking down. And I really don't know a single one that doesn't. And it's something that I won't miss either. So there can't be something more core and vital. I know we're saying that with a few things, but enzymes are one of those few things. You just don't want to overlook them really, really ever. And enzymes are not particularly expensive. Even very high quality formulas like the Solle Vertizymes, ours is more complex. And I will tell you, we got more than a few double takes when we decided to include herbs with the enzymes, because I've seen enzyme products that have them, but they're very trace. If you really knew how much, they barely put a sprinkle, what I call fairy dusting in formulas so that they can put it on the label, but really putting significant amounts is not common. But you know, in Solle, that's right in with our philosophy of addressing in every product. And no one's taught it more clearly than you did tonight, Erica. It starts north and it goes south, and stress is a north to south thing too. And so there really isn't any way to be successful without addressing the north. And that's why Vertizymes is a blue, by the way, is a blue label. It's because from everything that we know, we're learning all the time, right? The best of sharing with each other and in natural communities, and the best of science. When the body's in a rest state, that's when certain reparative and digestive functions, that's when they're stimulated or they jump into action or they're prompted into action. And Erica talked about that wonderfully today. So Vertizymes, it has a few uniquenesses. One is that it has calming herbs, 4 of them. In fact, the teaching that you brought tonight about addressing how would you say it?
The cephalic phase of digestion.
Cephalic phase, about addressing that. That's so important that we didn't just add 1 herb to address it, or 2 or 3. We added 4, and I realized that 2 of them tend to drop further south in their common fame for uses. The marshmallow, the peppermint, those are 2 of the 4 often used to calm, say, the midsection or lungs and heal this tract that Erica's been teaching about. Heal the mucus. When there can be lesions, there can be all sorts of different things in there. Imbalances, the probiotics, the microbiome can be depleted because of acidity and stress and lots of different things. And these 2 herbs make a difference in that. And in fact, peppermint itself, one of the studies, I was thinking about it when you mentioned people who've had gallbladder removed, because now they don't have the high concentration that sits in the gallbladder. They just have what the liver's producing. Well, peppermint is shown to actually increase bile production. So if I've got this weak, you know, I'm behind the 8 ball, well, I can do something that can protect liver and increase bile production and increase that trickle a little bit. And so and really make a difference there. So those are two of the four, but the other two are, well, it's hard to say pure cephalic in nature because nothing really is in a plant, but very, very focused there. Wood betony and passion flower. And that's the one that people are like, what? Passion flower with your enzymes, you know? And wood betony, I don't know. It doesn't take too long to convince people that it makes a good fit. But both of those are wonderful fits. They are great difference makers. I could run down 10 different studies in recent years on wood betony with about anything you can think of that throws into imbalance the brain and the signaling that it's trying to carry out. Like even ear infections of different types anywhere in the head, sinus or ear or whatever. And wood betony, I mean, I'm reminded of a study. There was a fragrance journal that they published a study of a bunch of herbs. It is funny to me that that's where it was published. And the highest one in antibacterial and microbial properties was wood betony. People don't always think of it as this great antimicrobial, but it is. And issues with inflammation, other issues. I'm thinking of Gillian Painter, who wrote a book called Materia Medica for I think Southern Hemisphere. He is from New Zealand, by the way. I was just looking up because I was trying to think, who is this Gillian? He's written actually quite a few books, really useful books on herbs. And he talks about, this is a man with tons of years in this, that it is one of the few herbs, is wood betony, for this north focus for digestion, that has a restorative effect on the nerves and nervous. So it's not just about mitigating our management of stress, but actually it has a restorative effect. And some early writings in the 1600s in the British, it's in like a certain British compendium, where I'm not even sure who the author is, a daily decoction on wood betony, and I think it was like raw milk for all matters of head, like from aches and pains to foggy brain to just any kind of matter of imbalance in our brain. This was the remedy of choice. So much so that it's found in a bunch of different writings. And I think I've shared before, I can't remember if we've talked about Renew here. The two, wood betony, we already did. And so I kind of shared those famous statements, you know, about how important it is in Europe, and glad that we have it here. But it is one of the key factors in Vertizyme. So there are the herbs, and the herbs are, I just love what we learned tonight about north to south, because they're very much there to help us balance the north, strengthen the north, even restorative, as we've heard about in the case of wood betony. The enzymes are not a run-of-the-mill enzyme group. That's the second part that I wanted to share tonight. They are specifically selected. There is an ample group for a typical meal if you take 2 capsules to digest all the food types. And in there, we actually added extra of something called glucoamylase, because there are so many studies that show more hard to digest carbs that tend to cause more bloating, gas, and other digestive imbalance. They are really effectively dealt with by glucoamylase. If you get enough of it, and if it's in your blend, and so this is another reason, because man, the percentage of people that say, okay, when I eat, I get full, I feel full too fast. I haven't eaten hardly anything yet, and I feel like bloated full, or I feel a little bit of acid, or I feel gas, or pain. I get these weird pains, don't know what the pains are, and I only get them when I eat. I mean, there's all these different things. The enzyme blend will deal with all of these issues. Now, there may be more to them, but it will deal in every single one of those issues. And one of the reasons is the glucoamylase and the balance of the others for fats, sugars or carbs, and proteins. The protein group is the other half of the story on this unique enzyme blend, because generally you'll see a company will select one. We'll select a source of a protein digestive agent or a protease, right? And I mean, often pineapple, often papaya, these are 2 really heavily used in the industry because they're wonderful. and readily available throughout the world. And then you'll also see specific just protein products that are super high dose. And I've even seen somewhere they'll list them. They'll list 2 or 3, but it's 2 or 3 different concentrations of the same one. And that does have a purpose, but I will tell you how the Solle formula is different. In the case of the Solle formula, this is what, not that you have to know this, but if it helps you remember, just like that there are 4 herbs to deal with this blue calming factor that's so key that Erica taught us tonight, there are 4 proteases, same number of both of those. That is coincidental, I will tell you, if that was not on purpose, but it helps us to remember. So why? Why did we do 4? Well, in the case of the herbs, why did we do 4? Same reason with the protease, or similar reasons. There is not one single plant that is identical to another. And even if it has a lot of the same components, I have heard debates from scientists, have been in the room, where a bunch of learned scientists after 30, 40 years will tell you that, for instance, calcium is the same, whether it's in calcium carbonate or citrate or lactate or in this herb or that herb. And the results show that that is simply not the case, because you can't look at a part of a structure of something and ignore the rest, the differences of the rest, and assume that it will act the same in the body. That may sound mathematical or logical, but it actually, in all of its evidence, is shown to not be true. The same would be with these wonderful blue calming herbs. They work a little differently, and we're all unique, and sometimes our needs are a little different. The thing that works just perfectly on target for me is a little different, for you. So that's part of the reason there are 4, is that, and part is that in the case of these herbs, they have this spectrum of things they do, and there's overlap in the spectrum, but there's also part of the spectrum that is unique for each herb. In other words, that nothing else of those 4 would do that one will do. That is why we did 4 proteases. But in the case of the proteases, we did 2 things. We first doubled the dose. So we took a full dose, even if we were to only use 1 protease, a full dose of each one. So now we have 4 times the dose, 4 proteases. Then we doubled all of them. So you can do the math and see why Vertizymes is so restorative. And I'll come back to the restorative part in just a second. But the reason for this is that the more we investigated, the more we could see, one, that they operate a little differently because the chemical structures are not identical, but 2, they actually work in different acid environments. And the reason why someone can use a protease sometimes and go, that did everything for me, it was what I wanted, and someone else can go, I took the high dose of that and it didn't do a thing, is because they actually have this spectrum of pH that they are most effective in and least effective in. And there is overlap, but they are also different. In other words, there's territory, like with the herbs, that does not overlap any other. So we tried to get the broadest, we very simply just tried to get the broadest range of pH we could of proteases. And that's why there are 4, because we got a much broader spectrum, meaning that depending on what's going on in your life and in your alimentary canal and everything that it connects to, your odds are much higher of seeing a good result, because at least 2 or 3, if not all of them, it just depends, but at least 2 or 3 of those proteases are going to be dialed in for you. I say at least 2 because that's how broad the range is. And so that's the reason that there are 4. The final thought that I'd like to leave you with tonight is that lots of studies point to taking these wonderful enzymes on an empty stomach, say before you go to bed. And that's why when we launched this, people were like, I will tell you, they'd started using them, because that's when it's not being utilized in so much anyway, in digestion, as much as absorbed and then used for what I would call a reconstruction. Muscles, purifying blood, abnormal cells, blood sugar levels. You could go fats in bloods. You could go down the list. Erica could probably give you a lot longer list than I could, but it's a long list. And these proteases are like the captains of the host. I mean, other enzymes and substances help in this, but they lead it out and they're so powerful. There's great German research that they did with, I'm not sure, I think it might have been athletes in muscle repair, recovery a lot faster with this. Dr. Allison reminded us that inflammation with proteases. This was the preferred prescription when Advil, ibuprofen, those things were not yet invented. You have to go back that far. Why? Because it actually worked. You had to take them. Now, I will tell you this, the concentrations and the quality were not available back then as are now. So they were taking a lot more, and a lot of people just didn't want to take that much. You don't need to of this, but you can take it multiple times in a day, and you can listen to your body, start small, and then build up and see what the capsule dose is for you, where you see change. So that's the end of the story. Is the proteases are half the enzyme story, because they're the restorers, rejuvenators, repairs, reconstruction, probably among other things, part of this formula. Okay, I probably talked too long, Erica, but that's everything I got.
It's never too long. It's never too long. But I love all of this information. I will tell you, the protease in here gets me super excited. I mean, this whole product, this formula, I mean, it's really just, I mean, it's incredible. But the proteases really do get me super excited, because one of the things too is, like, not only just everybody's different, but we're all different on any given day, depending on what we're dealing with. Our pHs are different every single day, depending on what we've eaten, or, if we got in a fight with our spouse, or, whatever it is. And so we can rely on, like, we know that more than likely, like, there's a 99 probably percent, I don't want to say a number, but like, there's a really super high chance that regardless, this is going to cover it. Like, so it's really going to help it. And this is the reason why, guys, I said, this helps with muscle preservation. If you're on a weight loss journey, you want to keep your, you want to have like your muscles really like strengthened, like, so that you're not losing muscle while you're losing fat. Vertizymes. Like, if you lift weights, Vertizymes. Like, if you're an athlete, you're on a, like some kind of journey, Vertizymes. Like, this is the thing. Like, if you're adding to your program, right? We've talked about the foundation. This is that thing that's like Vertizymes. Just like last week, you notice I buy it in the big bottles, right? Like, there's a reason for that, right? Because we're eating this like candy in the house. I mean, not really, but yeah, we take a lot of this. And then Vertizymes, we're taking a lot of this too. So we love both these products, and absolutely love Vertizymes. But I got a question while I have you, Greg. So I get a question quite often about the xanthan gum and cognac gum in the formula, and what is that, and why is it in there?
Yeah, that actually is the evolution of something that came from 30 years ago now in my own herbal journey. What companies were doing that really kind of were ahead of the curve. They were putting probiotics and some of them enzymes in enteric coated capsules, because these are the nature of these. If you can get them further down, from further south, I love this north south, then they would be even more effective. Okay, and get them, more of them intact into the small intestine. And to do that, it can't be digested in like 25 minutes in the stomach. The odds go way down. So if you can stretch that out to 45 minutes. So what they were doing is they were enteric coating these capsules. But the problem is it makes the capsules really brittle, and they can actually break or lose integrity and open up much sooner. What we determined to do with our chemist even before we founded Solle, while we were in the developmental phase, was use two very well-known that are acid resistant, but completely soluble fibers. Xanthan and cognac they both qualify. And then they have some other qualities that are good. I will tell you, this is a very small amount of them. I had someone ask me once, oh, so I'm getting fiber from this. No, you're not. There's not. This is such a small amount. All it is enough to bind to the various enzymes like a time release capsule. That's how I describe it. And so even though the capsule that might digest in 25, you get these fibers that envelop and bind to them. And you get all that goodness going a little further, going 45 minutes-ish, which is usually going to get you into your small intestine. So that's the reason it really is, we call it fiber tract, further in your tract. You know, the fiber to get it further in your tract, that's where that came from. So that's what it is.
I love it. I love it. So it's definitely good stuff. That's what I always tell people. Oh, that's just good stuff. Don't worry about it. It's all good stuff in there. You don't have to worry about anything on that label. Again, come back next week. We're going to dive deeper into digestion and specifically into when this digestive dysfunction kind of goes awry and we get those things like leaky gut and all those different digestive issues, and it starts affecting our immune system and autoimmune diseases. What do we do then, right? And what does that look like for us? So thank you so much, everybody, for sharing your time with us tonight.